Hey, it's Guy DiMartino and Tony Ashford. Today we're gonna talk a little bit about something that's very important, especially if your residence has been damaged in a fire and you don't have a place to live. And so, Tony, today I'd like us to talk a little bit about ALE or advanced living expense. So, if you can explain a little bit what that coverage is and how it works, that would be great.
Okay. Additional living expense is insurance coverage that covers the additional costs you incur for maintaining your ordinary standard of living. So if you can no longer live in your house, it's uninhabitable as a result of fire, water, or some other casualty to your home, additional living expense gives you coverage to allow you to either move to a temporary new home location with your family, could be a hotel, could be an apartment, um, and also covers additional expenses that you incur to maintain that standard of living, whether you have additional travel costs, you have additional food costs, uh, those sorts of things. That's the type of coverage that it is.
And it goes by other names too that people might see in their insurance policies. What are those names?
It's additional living expense or loss of use typically are the two names that it goes by.
And sometimes the insurance company, if you need to go out and stay in a hotel or something like that, they might give you an advance along for that type of coverage.
Correct. So sometimes it's the most important thing is to contact the insurance company and ask them about additional living expense or loss of use and how to process it. So some insurance companies may have a third party administrator. Sometimes they call them ALE or ALE now or ALE and some sort of derivation of that process the additional living expense, coordinates and pays for the hotel stay and works with you in getting your additional living expenses covered. Other insurance companies may ask you just to submit receipts, your hotel bill, and pay for it after the fact. It's Although it's better to have a third party that's processing that so that you're not paying these things in advance. The third party administrator, those costs are incurred as well. It may limit the amount of funds you have available for the additional living expense.
So if we have some folks that are like out to dinner or went to a concert, they come home and they find out that their house is burnt down, or the the fire personnel tell them that you can't go into the house today, you need to find some place to stay. Um, what types of availability do they have to work with their insurance on an emergency basis in order to get them a place to live? Because the only thing they have is clothes on their back.
Like I said, you need to communicate with the insurance company and find out how they process additional living expense. Um, there may be an issue depending on the circumstances as to whether the house is uninhabitable. Typically, it's pretty easy when there's a fire and you're out of your home to get approval for additional living expense. As I said, sometimes the insurance company will have an administrator that you contact that will process that, or they may have an entire department on additional that deals with additional living expenses and coordinates that with you. But it's important to coordinate with the insurance company up front so that you can either get reimbursement right away or you can get that helping hand. If you don't have the funds right away, or maybe your credit's not great, they can assist you in getting, some accommodations.
So this type of coverage, how does it present itself in an insurance policy? Is it by month? Is it by a dollar amount? How does it work?
It depends. Some policies will have a dollar limit. Let's say, for example, there may be $50,000 in coverage for additional living expenses. And those are policies that you got to be really careful with because, as one can imagine, if you're staying in a hotel for a significant period of time, that cost is going to add up. And if you have a dollar limit, say $50,000 or $30,000 or some sort of dollar limit, you may exhaust that amount fairly quickly if you don't you kind of budget that additional living expense money. So as one can imagine, if you stay in a hotel as opposed to staying in an apartment. If it's going to take you a year to get your house rebuilt as a result of a catastrophe, it's going to be much more economic to go to an apartment, potentially especially an apartment that's furnished, as opposed to getting a hotel. So if there's a dollar limit, you certainly would want to make sure that you're not blowing that additional living expense money too quickly. Other policies may not have a dollar limit. It may be a time limit, 1 year, 2 year actual expense. Those are really good policies. Those are preferable because they cover the out-of-pocket expense for additional living expense, regardless of the cost, but for a specific duration. Another thing to consider too is as you're in the rebuilding process, the insurance company is going to want to cut that off as soon as possible. So you want to make sure that they keep extending those benefits to you as long as they're necessary.
So I'm in the insurance business. With you, we work with insurance companies all the time. And, I don't know that I've really ever looked at my policy to determine what my ALE is. So I'm going to actually pull that up now because,
Okay.
so what types of expenses will ALE generally pay for?
Okay. So any increase in costs that affects your normal standard of living, that could be, okay, travel expenses. Let's say that your house burns down and you live in kind of a remote community. You don't have a lot of hotels, you don't have a lot of rental places, and you got to move 20 miles outside of your town. And then that, as a result of that, you increase your costs of travel. Well, an insurance company may cover your mileage for that. You may request, at the IRS rate for mileage. You might ask for a mileage reimbursement, or your increased gas for commuting back and forth. Another thing that you can ask for additional cost is, let's say, in your home, you maybe go out to eat twice a week, once a week with your family, and you incur, in general, let's say, just to make it simple, $100 a week in food costs. Well, as a result of being forced from your home, you're living in a hotel and you're going out to eat every day. Well, that if that costs $300 and your normal eating budget is $100 a week, the difference between the two would be the additional living expense. So if it costs you $200 more a week for food costs as a result of being displaced from your home, then you can get that reimbursed as additional living expense. Like I said, mileage is another thing. Anything that you feel is an additional cost as a result of you being forced from your home, it's worth, the individual circumstances may be different for each person, but if you feel that this is an additional expense, like boarding a dog, the cost to board your dog because you can't find an accommodation for your pets, that's an additional living expense. The cost, let's say that you relocate from your home and you have to go hire your neighbor Billy to come over there and mow your lawn because you're not there to mow it on yourself. That's an additional living expense. So any additional costs incurred as a result of you maintaining your normal standard of living, but having to do so away from your home.
Okay, so I just pulled up my policy, and I want to kick myself in the keister. My coverage is 114.9,
Okay, that's not terrible.
but it's not great
Um,
because if I'm out of the house for a year that it might take to get my house rebuilt, I mean, I'm
yes.
going to blow through that relatively quickly.
Potentially, if you're so that's the important thing of kind of budgeting this type of stuff. So if you okay, say your house burns down and you're gonna probably go stay at a hotel for a little while, well then minimize your stay in a hotel. Your house is gonna take at least 6 months to a year to rebuild. And I would start budgeting. I would start looking for a furnished apartment, something that can accommodate you, that's going to be less expensive than, staying at the Hyatt or the, Hilton down the street for an
Right, but
extended period.
if I'm gonna get a short-term rental, it's probably gonna be 3 grand a month. Then I'm gonna have two NIPSCO bills. Will they cover one of the NIPSCO bills?
Correct. Correct. If you have two NIPSCO bills, then the additional NIPSCO bill is going to be subject to ALE.
And
Correct.
so the additional one would be the one that would be for the property that I'm staying at, the apartment or the house that I have to rent.
Correct. So
Okay,
the
so I think I'm gonna have to raise my coverage.
what's that?
I think I need to raise my coverage.
It's probably not a bad idea. I looked at mine, and mine is a 2 year unlimited actual. Well, it's two limits, not unlimited. It's actual cost incurred for 2 years. That's about the best you can do. You're not going to have a policy that's going to cover you infinitely for additional living expense at some point. Well, and the other thing that you need to consider too is, let's say, um, the insurance company comes in and you agree that, your house is a total loss and you got to decide whether you're going to rebuild or you're just going to, go buy a new house. Um, at some point, you're going to have to make the decision to, either rebuild and carry on your life. They're not going to just give you carte blanche to do whatever you want for 2 years. You're going to have to make a decision at some point. The problem comes in when, let's say, your insurance company thinks it's only going to cost you $50,000 to rebuild your house, and you've got all these estimates, and yeah, the contractor's saying, "Oh no, this is going to be 250,000," and then you're like battling with the insurance company over, what's it going to cost to rebuild, while at the same time trying to maintain your ordinary standard of living. So in those circumstances, it's always best to have, an actual cost incurred with a 2 year time limit.
And looking at my policy, I also have a $2,500 deductible. Does the deductible apply to ALE? So is the first 2,500 out of my pocket?
No, typically the 2,500 deductible applies to the loss in general. Typically, the insurance company is not going to assess it against your ALE. They'll use it against your reconstruction on your home.
So I don't have to pay typically I wouldn't have to pay the first 2,500 to get a hotel or something. I might have to get reimbursed, but otherwise that's not
Correct.
my cost. Okay, I'm going to increase my ALE. The other thing regarding ALE is how good of a record. I'm not a really good record keeper. Are there any? Do you tell me about what we have to do to keep records?
Okay. Maintain receipts. So one of the easy things to do, okay, especially nowadays in society, we're not like throwing cash around in general, is keep make sure you pay everything with a credit card. Hopefully you're not carrying a balance so you're paying like 20 some percent interest. But do everything you can to try to keep a good record of your additional living expense. And the other thing is, you know, I would keep, I would inundate your insurance adjuster with paper. Maybe turn this stuff in on a weekly basis, so that they're getting this stuff right away. Understand if you decide that you're just going to submit like a pile of receipts once you're done and you're ready to move in your house, that's something that can be fraught with peril. What if you lose receipts? And the other thing is, you're just gonna, the more communication and the more cooperation you have with the insurance company, getting them receipts, getting them documentation, the better off you're going to be. And the one thing to consider too is you want to kind of set the standards so you're both on the same page, your insurance adjuster and you. And so make the submission right away, get approval for things so that this isn't a battle later on with the insurance company.
What a lot of folks don't have like a lot of disposable cash. You know what I mean? A lot of folks live, hand to mouth, especially newer families. So what happens if the insurance company, starts, making you wait 4 to 6 to 8 weeks in order to get reimbursement for these expenses, or they don't pay your landlord, they don't submit the check to your landlord? What do you do in those situations?
Honestly, the best thing you can do when you have a fire, because understand something, if there is some sniff by the insurance company that this is intentionally set, it doesn't matter whether you're vacationing with a family out in Disney. The insurance company, especially some of these adjusters, like, oh, somebody burned down your house. Clearly you wanted to burn down your own house. I don't understand why they come into it with this jaded perspective. But yeah, there may be some delays. Probably the best thing you can do if you have let's say you have a fire or a major water damage claim, is to look for an attorney that handles, first party insurance claims in bad faith, because the ones that spend a lot of time doing this kind of work can help guide you through this. And in a simple letter may get something resolved on the front end. Just to give you an example, if the insurance company, let's say there's a fire of unknown origin, and the insurance company, that most of them will send an origin and cause investigator, and they may not want to pay anything until their origin and cause investigator has completed their investigation and determined that this wasn't, an intentional act. They may delay paying stuff. They may delay the claim. But if it's additional living expenses, and you are, communicating with them, you're sending them receipts, you're trying to coordinate this stuff. Well, at that point, if the insurance company is refusing to pay this stuff, you're already at a place where the insurance company is potentially breaching the policy. Having an attorney is going to get that stuff paid, because even if the insurance company is not sure whether they're going to cover the loss and wishes to do a reservation of rights, they themselves are in huge peril if they're refusing things for your emergent needs, like additional living expenses, board up costs, mitigation. There's a huge risk on their part that they're breaching the contract or the policy at the get-go.
Well, there you have it, Tony. We've spent 15 some odd minutes talking about ALE. I bet you folks don't even know that they have this type of coverage under their policy. They don't give it any thought when they go ahead and ask an agent for homeowners insurance. But this coverage is just as important, if not more important, for your day-to-day activity than your coverage on your dwelling.
No doubt.
Okay, my man. Have a good one.
Thanks.